Are we
that
testing, or are we?
no. It should be fine because the bars are all working the way they're supposed to be. The recording's on it. This should be fine. I will take
Okay.
responsibility if for whatever reason this ends up failing later on, but this should work fine.
Yes. Sorry, I just had to hack up something, but fortunately, I have a personal mic on the headset, so I can always get rid of those problems by muting. Are we live now, though?
We
Like
are
officially?
recording, yes. We have just
Ah,
gone through the first
yes.
couple of
Right.
minutes, yes.
Okay. Welcome back, everyone. This is the second protagonist swap in a series of four we're doing. I don't think you'll be, even though we're recording this now before the stream for the first one, this is probably going to release after the stream for the first one.
Oh, well, we're December now,
Most likely.
so they'll probably be getting the first protagonist swap probably like tomorrow or the day after. So, we can release it
Yeah, well,
whenever. We're in
it's.
December.
I was gonna say you can literally release it tonight if you want, and then they'll have Monday. Well, and actually, we could potentially do a stream in the next few days, but they'll have a day or two, a few days to mull it over and be like, "Oh, is that? Did he really say that?" Um, but yeah, then this will drop after the stream. So this is the opposite scenario. So as we discussed in the first one, Titus basically got yeeted out of his universe with his squad from Space Marine 1 when he was in the Thunderjet, about to be aboard the Forge World of Graia, and he got swapped with the entirety of Noble Team. So all six Spartans were just, well, I mean, they weren't really all sitting in like the Falcon, but we're going to pretend they were all teleported from their universe into the Thunderhawk. And they're just kind of like standing there. Um,
Menacingly.
uh, yes, menacingly. Much like with the previous scenario, we'll assume there is, because the Imperium in this case is just really nice. They will have like a little log or like a folder indicating to them what their objective is. If not, they'll just be told directly from the omniscient narrator that they're supposed to retake the Forge World of Graia, eliminating the orcs and fighting their way to the Titan factory. Either using asset denial by destroying the Titan somehow, or just simply killing the orcs or the war boss, or doing whatever it takes to essentially destroy their forces on the Forge World of Graia until Imperium reinforcements arrive. And they'll be like, okay, here's a picture of what an orc looks like. And like they're a war boss, so you know what you're fighting. Here's a picture of a Titan. Here's the picture of the Imperial Guard, so you know who you're going to rendezvous when you get down on the battlefield. That's all you're getting. You're not getting any intel on them. That's all you're getting, and the Spartans are going to be like, "Well, this fucking sucks. We're going to fight the Covenant." So as usual with most protagonist swaps, squad swaps, they get normally they get 3 lives, but this is a squad swap with multiple people. They get 2 lives plus a bonus because the protagonist swaps usually have a bonus, um, and they have the stats of whatever the character is, but they do not have the resistances or the physiology. So they are as fast and as strong AP, DC, durability wise as Titus's squad, and they have like the reaction speed, but they are not like they do not have their physiology. They do not have the specific functions of what their Astartes armor is, if their Astartes armor has unique stuff. Nor their skills. They have to bring their own to that. For this scenario, I thought it would be interesting to give Noble Team all their own like custom loadouts, though they'll mostly be based on the existing loadout that they have from the game. So everybody is going to have at least their standard weapon associated with them. So Carter will have his assault rifle, Kat will have her Magnum, Noble 6 will have his DMR, Emil will have his shotgun, George will have his light machine gun, and then June will have a sniper rifle. Since the Mjolnir armor does have like magnetic grips on the back of its armor, they will also have the ability to have like a secondary weapon and like a small pistol. So they'll all have a magnum. We're not counting like Kat's magnum because Kat's magnum for her primary would technically be that magnum, so she'll have 2 other weapons. And each of them will have an armor ability specific to them. Though for Carter, Six, and um, Cat, I will give them just generic armor abilities from like Sprint and Armor Lock, because I think that June, Emil, and George are more fitted to having a specialist role in terms of direct combat, given their weapon choices and the way they actually fight. So I'll give Emil a rocket launcher. I'll give George a Spartan laser, and I will give June a DMR. Whereas Kat will basically get like a grenade launcher because I believe she has one during the events of Tip of the Spear. And then Carter will essentially just get like either a DMR or something else. And Six will have an assault rifle. So Carter and Six will basically be interchangeable, except they're running different primary weapons. And Six will have sprint, whereas Carter will have armor lock. George will have medic shield.
I really hope you have this written down somewhere because you are not
I,
remembering.
I, I can memorize all this. I assure you. George will have medic shield. Emil will have hologram to complement his shotgun running strategy and his rockets. And June will naturally have active camouflage since he is mostly supposed to be a long distance stealth unit. Yeah, there's not too much to go over aside from that. They all will have about 4 primary frag grenades. I guess we could give them plasmas, but like I would say that for this scenario, when it comes to their default loadouts, we're giving them stuff that would be available to Oni at the time that would be deployed into the missions. So that's about it. Like, so since it's a shooter scenario, the weapon deployment things in the field that they can pick up, the ones that would be normally available for Titus, the weapon vaults, those will just be replaced with a drop of UNSC weapons. And one of those, somewhere along the line, will have like plasma weapons. But most of them are going to be like different UNSC weapons or things that they've recovered, maybe like explosive weapons, sniper rifles, that kind of stuff. Maybe even armor abilities. So, going into this scenario, I think that's about all I can cover. They don't really have any other like major gadgets aside from their Mark V Mjolnir armors. So they'll just decide to kick open the door, press the button, open it up, and jump out the Thunderhawk. Or they can choose to take the jump packs that are on the sides, because they technically all are big enough to fit those things, and they're more than powerful enough. A lot of people actually assume that Titus kind of just jumped out from orbit. That's not actually true. He uses the jump pack to basically propels his way down to the orc ships, because you're essentially in like a low orbit or inner atmosphere jump, and you're flying down to the orc ships in the atmosphere, and you're trying to land on one of them to essentially disable it during the first chapter mission, which is Planetfall. And this is like the first act of the game, basically. Yes. I think. I'm sorry. What was you say?
No, I'm just saying. I'm just agreeing with you. Okay, carry on.
Yes. Yeah. So there's about 5 acts in the game, or give or take. We only have about 4 that they're going with, and then I think once we get to Act 4 or the end of Act 3, things will change drastically because chaos gets involved. But I'll get to that when I get to this. So for the most part, this is when they drop down to this section. This is mostly just going to be orc Gretchens and regular orcs. And when it comes to most orcs, at least in the game, oh boy, they're not strong enough to fight a space marine anyway. They wouldn't be strong enough to fight a Spartan in lore, but like if I were to use the actual descriptions given from the guidebook, like the actual guidebook, I believe the orcs here are actually only listed as well, hold on one moment.
Holding on.
Give me one moment.
Holding on for dear life.
One more moment.
Need more moments.
More moments. Aha. So Yes, so they actually give you the weight limit, but for some reason it's not in kilograms, despite the fact that everything in Warhammer is listed in kilos. It's listed in pounds, which is like a lot, smaller. About like give or take 55% lighter. But Gretchens are listed as being like 50 pounds. Boys and Scarboys, which are like your standard orcs, are about 300 pounds. Which means even out of armor, most Spartans weigh about as much as an orc. In armor, they would weigh more than like double or triple the weight of an orc. So in muscle mass alone, they're gonna send them flying. Granted, they are as strong as Space Marines in this context, so I guess they're technically a little bit lighter. Because Titus's squad, funnily enough, is actually only 750 pounds. I'm fairly certain that was supposed to be 750 kilos, because that sounds wrong. But even if it was only 750 pounds, 750 pounds is more than double what 300 pounds is. So his weight mass is way bigger than an orc. So they're going to punch and crush them pretty easily with their fists. Um, but they won't have to do that technically. They could just shoot them with their guns. Most orcs don't actually have like complete armor covering all their body. They only have like armor plates on like the fronts and the sides. So they're just going to kind of shoot them through the head directly and kill them. Um, yeah, there's not much to it. Like orcs in general are not really like that complex of an army. What were you going to say?
Well, they're not that dangerous, like on their own, basically.
Yeah, like the main attribute that orcs bring to the table in most games and most novels is that they just have a lot and they just swarm you. But like in this circumstance, we're on like a ship where they're kind of like running around, and there are 6 Spartans here that all have different weapons that are all tactically working together, and each one of them is as strong as a Space Marine. So to put that in perspective, the only orc that's like strong enough to fight you, take bullets, and fight you in a 1v1 is like a Nob or the War Boss. And Nobs are like the second highest orcs in most gatherings of orcs that are eventually supposed to become strong enough to challenge the War Bosses. Those are the big ones with the hammers and the red helmets. Um, Most orcs in the campaign are not Nobs. There are plenty of Nobs here and there, but like they're not usually Nobs. So they're going to be massively outclassed in terms of the amount of armor and power that they need. Their weapons are not that strong by comparison. I mean, they do have the bolters, yes, so they could technically. Well, actually, no, they can't even penetrate their armor because they don't even consistently penetrate. Even with their rundown bolters that they have, they don't even consistently penetrate Space Marine armor. It usually takes like a horde of orcs slamming their weapons on Space Marine Astartes armor over time to break it down. And then they just kill like scores and scores of them. So by the time an Astartes has died, it's like dozens or hundreds of orcs have died because most of them just run into their line of fire. Which, given the amount of orcs in the mission, that basically means they're gonna kill them like way before they get to that location because they're just gonna camp the orcs.
They're just gonna camp them.
Uh,
Is that what you just said?
they're just they're just going to camp them, which is what the Ultramarines would be doing anyway. Spartans are definitely going to be doing this. They're trained in all forms of like range combat, stealth tactics, close quarters combat, explosives. There's very little that the orcs are going to be able to do to match most of them. Spartan 3s in particular, which is most of Noble Team, have been trained since they were like 4 or 5 years old. Um, a lot of them have mostly just specialized in killing like rebel humans and assassinations, but they still know how to handle pretty much all forms of weapons. And since they have the Spartan augmentations from the Mjolnir program, they pretty much have like a bunch of other bullshit that I didn't really mention so much in the previous protagonist swap because it wasn't really relevant and it was only physiologically related to the Space Marines. Got it. But the Spartans essentially have a form of technique mimicry, where when they train with each other, they actually just pick up on each other's techniques and movements just by watching or seeing them like once or twice. This is actually confirmed in the Spartan 4 guide, in the operations guide. that Spartans are expected to train with other Spartans to learn martial arts styles, and they're actually expected to train in like 3 different types of martial arts between like what is it, like Aikido or hang on, give me one moment. It's a specific statement is given for it.
Yeah, because I was gonna say that's gonna be a you thing. I have no idea what that answer would be there.
Well, I have the guide right here, so I just needed the specific thing in question. Oh wait, it's earlier on, and sorry, it's way earlier on. Give me one moment.
Way earlier on, apparently.
Yeah,
'Cause I was gonna
here it
say,
is.
oh, he's got it.
So under the close quarters combat techniques, they're basically taught jujitsu, Krav Maga, and Aikido to deal with things like elites, insurrectionist rebels, or things like brutes. So they know how to fight people who are heavier than them, people who are more limber than them, and people who are smaller than them. These are like 3 different martial arts that they're taught, but they're also taught to develop their own martial arts techniques and master their own fighting styles. So most Spartans, on average, are a master of like 3 or 4 different fighting styles in melee combat. You're not gonna be able to like beat them in a hand-to-hand combat like skill-based scenario unless you have like overwhelming amounts of force to the point where you just like one-shot them, which, as we've established, the orcs do not, and there are 6 Spartans here. It'd be a difference maybe if it was just like Noble Six or Cat or like Carter by themselves, but like there's all of them standing right there. And unlike during the Reach campaign, which they're also going to end up crashing and piloting the ship down to the ground because that's what ends up happening at the beginning of Chapter 1. They just go through the city. I'm going to point out that they're not really going to lose any of the Noble Team members. Because during Reach's campaign, the reason why you keep losing members periodically throughout missions, and I'm not talking about their deaths, I mean like they just periodically leave and they hop in a Falcon and leave, is because most of them have different responsibilities where they have to, reconnect with NavSpec Command or ONI. Like Carter in particular has a chain of command, like he has to report to somebody, so he often has to leave or do something else, or sometimes you have to split up because that's how Spartans operate. That would not be the case here because there is no chain of command that they're reporting to. They're operating as an independent agent. Well, go ahead.
No, yeah. So they would just always be together, and they would just like be covering each other's back at all times, basically.
Yes, so they're significantly more deadly than they would be in the campaign. We're talking like many times more deadly because all 6 of them are going to be around each other at all times, which means very few people, actually pretty much none of them, are going to sneak up on them. I don't want anyone to mention. I don't want anyone to mention the Blood Axes or Orc Commandos. They're not in the game. Don't make Orc memes about sneaking. Fuck off. Warhammer fans will know what I'm talking about. But basically, well, go ahead.
No, well, I hope somebody does.
So when they get down to the ground, they're just going to try and rendezvous with the guardsmen on the ground and try and find their way to wherever their ships are or wherever their battle encampments. I believe there are some trenches that are caught out here. Yeah, you meet them in Chapter 2. So I'll just say for the record, just to get through the scenario in some reasonable pace, that aside from Knobs, the war boss, and like, I want to say, maybe Weird Boys and Big Shooter Boys, which is to say the Orc Psychers and the heavy weapons specialists for Orcs, and I guess Big Nogs, Ard Boys and things like Scarboys Boys, Gretchens, Bomb Squids, Shooter Boys, they're not gonna do anything to the Spartans. Part of the reason why the shield systems on the Mjolnir suit are really relevant is that like even if that gave them the stats for the Astartes armor, they technically would have a stronger shield system that exists on top of that. We just assume it's equivalent to whatever the Iron Halo is. but that still means that all the Spartans effectively have a permanent regenerating omnidirectional iron halo on their body at all times from the beginning of the campaign.
Let's emphasize the omnidirectional part again, just in case no one heard that. Let's emphasize that part again.
Omnidirectional. Oh, something I'll correct in the live stream, so you'll see it before you get here. I'd like to point out with the scenario is I had mentioned, I was incorrect about this, that you could actually just cross the gap and push your way into like an elite shields. I was incorrect about this for the reason that I'm going to bring up now, which is that this technically would equate to the elite shields because the Mjolnir shields are reverse engineered from an elite shield generator unit. You actually can't just, throw your hands at a Spartan under a certain velocity. The shield, so the reason why the Spartans can pick up things and hold objects without activating the shield is because the shield is not active under like a millimeter or so they can grab it. If you hold your hand even a centimeter above the armor, even Spartans can trigger their own energy shield that way. This is demonstrated in the Fall of Reach when John puts on the Mark V armor for the first time. He actually triggers his own energy shield by attempting to touch it slowly. So even if you try to melee them, the shield will trigger, and the shield often recharges pretty fast.
So yeah, that scenario just got worse. Okay, understood.
Yeah, that scenario technically got worse. I'm not going to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it yet, but oh god, it got way worse. We were technically lore inaccurate, but not for the right reasons. The wrong reasons. And also, technically, like, okay, so this would be easier to talk about, like, consistent melee damage from the orcs if the orcs were using things like chainswords or possibly power weapons. The orcs don't do that. The orcs just assemble weapons from random scrap metal and stuff and then just swing it at you with full force. That's why it takes them so long to break through Astartes armor. So it's probably not going to break through the Mjolnir armor because once they realize they can engage them in melee and they just wait for them to recharge the shields, they're just going to cycle in and cycle out and take different formations, covering each other while their shields regenerate. So unless the orcs have shoot-a-boys, which are going to have to target the Spartans with regenerating shields, which is probably not going to happen because they're going to take those out first. The Spartans are always going to have shields, or they're always going to have someone covering them while the shields are regenerating.
Yes.
So, realistically, they're just going to sweep the entirety of Act 1, because none of the orcs have the tools or the resources or really anything at their disposal, like the training, just fight them. They're going to rendezvous with Mira. She's going to tell them that they basically need to go take out the orcs at the... they need to take out the planetary defense gun that they're using to shoot down their support ships. They'll go do that, and they'll eventually run into their...
Mangler? No.
Sorry, I got disconnected.
Yeah,
because
there's lag. No.
Well, actually, I don't know why that happened. So this is the point where there are like some drop pods, or not drop pods, sort of weapon vaults that are available in the level that you can go and get. So we'll say this is where their first ammo supply thing is present. Now, for most of the Spartans, they usually have anywhere from like 5 to 6 to 10 magazines for most of their guns, and they each have 2 guns plus a backup. Some of them can have an excessive amount, because I do believe in Nightfall, you're actually given a sniper rifle and a pistol that has an excess amount of weapon, like excess amount of ammo, instead of it being like, what is it, like 28 rounds, you have like 40 to 60. For like the sniper rifle, it's like a really high amount of rounds. So if we're giving them like maximum ammunition for most of their weapons, like I don't know if they'll even need to resupply. Like they'll do it, but like technically they'll have more than enough ammo to get through the scenario. So we'll just say this will just be like resupply for their normal weapons. not anything like super crazy. So no rockets, Spartan lasers, or anything else. So if they use those weapons, they're basically just going to have to eat that loss. Um,
Okay.
Continuing on as they go through these little sections into the belly of the beast, I believe you just go through the fortress walls to find your way up to where the yes, you make it into the fortress for the artillery shells. You have to push the artillery shell into place. This should not be a problem. They have the same push strengths and push feats as the Space Marines. Um, Even if they didn't, while the shell is technically massive, it's never really given like a stated amount. And for what it's worth, Spartans do have the ability to lift. Well, they have the ability to flip warthogs. Warthogs are about 3.3 tons normally, and they can also flip things like razorbacks, which are like 4.5 tons. And to be clear, I did not say like they can lift it from the ground and then hold it over their hands. I said they flipped it. To flip something, you would have to pick up the object and launch it into the air with such force that it is doing a revolution. So you have to apply several times the amount of force of the weight of the object in order to get it airborne. So instead of it being like 3.3 tons, they're lifting somewhere in the range of like 7, 9, or several tons on top of that. If anyone was wondering what like the lore accurate, um, you know, presentation of the Spartan would be. What were you gonna say?
So I hear you talking about flipping all this basic shit, but where's the good feat? Why don't you talk about them flipping the elephant?
No, you can't mention the elephant because the elephant's only in Forge, and even in the Forge when that happens, the button prompt says like press RB to wait to lift. Wait, how do you do that? So,
I'm just hearing you downplaying Spartans. What? What?
bro, look, if you want to talk about lifting things like a specter or maybe even a wraith or a scorpion, maybe, but an elephant that is clearly not like intended.
Crazy, crazy. Go on.
Yeah, they'll just push it into place. All they have to deal with at this point are squigs and shooter boys. Now, shooter boys do have high powered bolters, but they can just, you know, shoot them in the face. They don't really have any armor. Their heads are green. Like they don't really have any like they're visually very obvious, is what I'm saying, and they don't really take cover. Squigs also in the game they are lit up with two like dynamite looking sparks on the sides of their bodies, so you can see them, and they also scream as they're running around. So the Spartans who have really really good hearing are going to be able to hear this. They actually have statements in the lore that they can hear a pin drop in a sandstorm. So I'm pretty certain they're going to hear the sound of this screaming, exploding slave dog that's running around with a bomb attached to it. Um, oh, yeah, I forgot to mention, anyone is wondering why the orcs aren't, if the orcs don't have something, maybe like a sneak attack or something they could do, or maybe some kind of like overwhelming amount of force or numbers. Not really. Most of the armor abilities can take care of that. Armor lock would literally just like slap everyone in front and prevent them from getting to them. Emil has things like hologram. June has active camo, so he can constantly sneak in and out. But they all have something called Smart Link, and they're visors. Zim, do you actually know what Smart Link is?
Is that what shows them where their objectives are and stuff like that? Because that's what I was guess.
No, that's their standard visor, which can show like outlines of people's bodies and gives them like a grid and a visual of everything, so they shoot. They know where everyone is. No, that's not. That's visor is like a downgraded version of this, but that's the standard thing that every UNSC helmet has. Smart Link is technically something that was in Halo Reach, and I think in the lore at that time of Halo 3, but it's not really an official gameplay mechanic until Halo 5. It's basically a system where when you shoot something, it actually gives you a cannon hit marker in your HUD to indicate that the bullets or whatever you were using, hit an impact and cause an impact. So you not only see your target moving, you know you hit your target, and you know how many of your shots hit the target.
That sounds
So if
ridiculous.
anyone, I'm sorry, what?
That sounds ridiculous.
Yes, that is something that all Mjolnir systems, as of like Mark 5, for certain Mark 6, but like Mark 5 and the experimental ones with Gen 1 exoskeletons would have, which Noble Team has a Mark 5 grade plus a Gen 1 exoskeleton. So they have extra modular equipments, such as the armor abilities and other things, that normal Mark 5 Spartans would not have. They have premium equipment for their time, which is kind of ironic because they actually don't have the Halo 2 or the Halo 1 pistol or the Halo 2 battle rifle, which is apparently below sword base, but they don't have access to it for some reason. Fucking stupid. Anyway, I'm not complaining. That's not me. It couldn't be me.
Playing when Halo
But
3 is the best battle rifle in the series.
trash. So technically, canonically, it actually has a higher in lore. It has a higher stopping power, which is hilarious because gameplay wise is not accurate at all. But continuing on, they'll just stop the shell, blow it up with like they'll just ride it up to the top when it's fed into that package, and then they'll probably just take a number of bolter rounds and then put like a rocket shell or some pack on it to detonate it, because that's how they end up destroying that's how Titus ends up obliterating the, what's it called? The, God, I can't think of names like what was. I'm sorry.
Check your guidebook. You literally have
Yeah,
one
no,
right
I have it right here. The planetary defense gun. That was the word. I was looking for the word. I knew what I was referring to. I just didn't know the word for it. Afterwards, they just have to stop them from laying siege to the Manufactorum for the entirety of Act 2. They're just going to run through most of these sections, killing orcs, flanking, taking cover as they do. I would like to also mention that for some of these, since the Spartans aren't like, they're not like the Space Marines in that they're not really dogmatic and like super religious towards the killing of like Xenos. They just kind of work to operate and control their objectives and accomplish their mission. They can just skip whatever orcs they want. Like, as long as they accomplish the central objective, they're not going to feel obligated to do it unless someone's in danger. If there's like a guardsman nearby, yeah, they'll probably help them out. But like, if there's just a bunch of orcs running around and they could just skip past them, if they don't have to eliminate them, they can do that. For those of you who might be curious, like how they go about this, well, aside from the fact that they have motion sensors that read out to like tens of meters that can tell them where everyone is at all times, Spartans actually have statements that in the Mjolnir armor they move without a sound, and most of them on average have feats of moving. I think the Spartan 2s after becoming augmented at 15 years old with no Mjolnir armor, just fresh out of the process, are capable of moving over like 30 something miles an hour. Later, with higher augmentations and stuff by the end of the war, they would have been capable of moving like 50% to like 100% faster than that. Post-war, in the Mark 6 armors, some of them literally moved fast enough to catch ghosts and were stated to be fast enough to move as fast as warthogs. If I'm using the numbers as they're presented right now, even with sprint, they can move up to like 40 something miles an hour, and they can do it silently because of how the Mjolnir armor function works with traction. So I want you to imagine the weight of someone that's like half a ton or so running across the battlefield like a car, except they don't make any sound. So That's effectively nobility. Assuming the orcs don't spot them, there are going to be points where they can just speed blitz across the battlefield and just keep running to their objective. And they're not going to have to engage with anybody if they don't need to, unless it's directly central to their objective, like holding orcs off of the manufactorum or reinforcing this area, helping guardsmen. They could just skip and then move to the next section.
That's silly.
Yeah. Well, I didn't make the technology. Uh, they will actually have counters for the big shooter boys that are coming up, because while the shooter boys do have not just las cannons but also like additional rocket things, the Spartans also have two additional things involving their physiology and their armor. One is that Spartans, technically three things. So Spartans don't actually move as normal people do, and I don't mean like superhumans. I mean that they're not just faster because they're superhuman. They move instinctively. So the Mjolnir armor itself is linked directly to their neural network, but it's actually stated to be moving usually as fast as like John in the early novels, early timeline novels like Silent Storm, Oblivion, and I think even in Fall of Rage, does point out that the armor basically moves with their thoughts, but it actually moves as before the thoughts even form into their very brain. Before it becomes a conscious thought in their brain, the Mjolnir suit is already acting on that thought. It is moving before their like neurons are firing in their brain. And they constantly consider it an extension of their own body. So that is essentially the same thing as instinctive reaction, because it's literally happening without any sort of conscious thought, preceding conscious thought. And there are statements in the guides that Kelly, who is considered the fastest Spartan, is even more instinctive and moves more instinctively than the other Spartans, which would indicate that the Spartans have instinctive reaction. Though this is more so instinctive movement, meaning they're always constantly moving instinctively. So all the Spartans are basically in a state of ultra instinct, is what I'm saying. Or a better version of it,
Bruh.
as that's what the Mjolnir suit allows. I'm sorry, what are you complaining?
No. Carry on.
So that was the first one. I didn't mention the second one, which is the Mjolnir's onboard computer targeting system. Something that they can also activate with a thought, because all of the systems in the Mjolnir suit, aside from like very specific armor abilities like armor lock, well, actually, I think the armor lock system would still fall into this if it's attached to their body. The armor ability, I mean, not the function of armor. The Mjolnir's onboard computer is something that basically contains the full UNSC database of terms, classified information, and anything that would be available to the Spartan in battle. This also includes records and things that they can keep. It also includes a computer that has not only a calculator, also has a mathematical calculator for determining the projectile velocity, trajectory, and landing times of, as well as timers for projectiles and basically anything they want. So a good example of this is that in the, I believe in one of the novels, John uses this to determine where a Banshee's firing rates or firing routes are going to land. So he can essentially just like predict when he has to fire a shot or when he has to dodge based on the flight route. And it can also calculate the frequency and pattern of attacks. So in the event that they run into an orc situation or orcs firing artillery or long shots, he could just access the onboard computer with a thought and ask it to determine what the firing rates are, make a trajectory, what have you, and then just dodge when those missile strikes are going to come in, or start moving or shoot them before the missile strikes happen. So they'll always have like a play when shit hits the fan, if those missiles become a problem. They'll always either be able to take them out, they'll know whether when to engage or re-engage, they'll know where to shoot them, they'll know where to dodge, they'll know what they're doing before the orcs will even what's going, is what I'm saying.
So the further along they go with this, they're just going to be more and more effective, and it's just going to be less and less dangerous the further they go on.
It's gonna be less and less dangerous. Yes. I've already kind of provided examples, I think, before of the UNSC weapons, because I haven't talked about it this much in this scenario because I figured that people would have watched the first one. But in case you didn't, and people are asking the big question, like, how would UNSC weapons work on orcs? Well, orcs don't wear any armor, so any sufficiently powerful kinetic weapon would just kill them. But like UNSC weapons are largely implied to be capable. They're shown to literally pierce through the Mjolnir armor. Buck has his Mark 6 Mjolnir armor pierced at a range from some guy's rifle. I was actually incorrect about this previously. I thought it was an automag. It was not. And it was not close up to his body. It was actually at a distance, and it was some random gun provided by this guy. So there are weapons. It was, to his credit, it did have a really big barrel, according to Buck, and he said that it could have taken a chunk out of his shield, so he considered it a powerful rifle. But that would still mean anything that falls under the distinction of like a shotgun or a sniper rifle or something can pierce through a Mark 6 Mjolnir armor, which is like reinforced forms of titanium A, the same stuff they put on starships. And it has statements of being able to tank like artillery rounds. Weaker armors can tank things that can obliterate large boulders easily. So any bullet that can pierce or even significantly damage that armor, even in small portions, is going to be capable of going through an orc's skull pretty easily, or portions of their body. The only thing they would have to worry about, well, actually, no, they wouldn't have to worry about that. Technically, orcs do actually leave behind fungi that spawns other orcs, but that usually takes hours, and technically, it's not their responsibility to have cleanup crew, because they don't have like flamethrowers or flamers, and that's not what Titus's squad did, not to mention they wouldn't have a reason to believe that. Plus, if they saw that an orc was putting back its helmet on, they would just react to it or watch their motion sensors for an alert, and then they would just log that, oh, the orcs, if their head is close too attached to their body, probably needs to get dismembered. So then they'll just start like double tapping orcs. And that was all for like the basic kinetic weapons. But I think that's mostly it. Then they'll just rendezvous with Drogon eventually, because Drogon is going to send out a servo skull, hoping for a space marine, and unfortunately he's going to get some random super soldiers. Be like, this wasn't part of the plan. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention to Zim. Yeah, Drogon, by the way, at this point is not Inquisitor Drogon anymore. He's technically a chaos demon that's infecting his lifeless corpse, pretending to be Drogon. So the Spartans aren't going to notice this at all, nor would they care. Well, I guess they would care, but like they wouldn't know this at all. But Drogon's, I'm just pointing out, like, he's not actually Drogon. He's a fraud. He's literally a wolf in sheep's clothing. In this case, or a wolf in sheep's clothing, not literally, figuratively. So they'll still follow most of his orders and go to grab the warp device, which is what he demands, and they'll just fight through most of the facility that he needs in part 3. I don't think they're going to break off and separate anywhere. They do eventually run into orc psychers, I believe. Somewhere here. Yes, the weird boys. So I'm just gonna say that the orc psychers are like the only things that could technically threaten the Spartans aside from the war boss. But that's only because the orc psychers can technically channel the Wog energy to shoot it at people in the form of like psychic energy from the warp. But that's only if they produced it in the form of a projectile made of pure warp energy that actually does something, like, you know, hellfire or something of that nature, which would just end up burning their armor. Orcs in the game kind of just do the shockwave thing. They don't really like do anything beyond that. So they're not really offensive units. They're more so support units. They just summon in other orcs and put energy barriers around the area. So they're not gonna directly be using like the ability. The one unit that could hurt them, ironically, doesn't even use their powers in an effective manner, like for the purposes of hurting them. That and technically with enough shots, you can eventually just force enough pressure on the Psyker to wear down its defenses until you eventually end up killing them. That's usually how that works in the books. Oh, well, no, I think it's probably like the weird boy only shows up like 2 or 3 times in the entire campaign. Is not very like prominent. You have anything you wanted to say, Zim? We're almost halfway through the scenario now.
Well, I was gonna say, like, I mean, I don't really have too much to say here because, like, not only are the Spartans sort of cleaning house with all this bullshit you keep pulling out of the lore, but like, I also don't know enough about Space Marine Run to actually comment, so I can't even really defend the orcs here. So, carry on.
Yeah, well, I was gonna mention the nature of the weapon having like pure warp energy, but since Space Marine 2 is mentioned, well, actually, I'll go into that a little bit. So their goal in going into this facility and getting to the Titans is that basically the reason why they helped Drogon in the first place is that on their way to the Titans in the Manufactorum, Drogon tells them like, there's no reason for you to go and do that because I just have a weapon on the planet that can kill all the orcs, and then everyone can secure the Titans later. It's called the Psychic Scourge, and I need to power it using the experimental device. So that's why Titus goes and gets the experimental device with his squad, because if you could just kill all the orcs on the planet, then you have accomplished your objective. Other Imperial Guardsmen teams and Space Marines that'll be in the area can secure the Titans anyway, because all the orcs on the planet will be dead. So the primary threat has been eliminated. So they'll go and get the device. Now, in the lore, originally in Space Marine 1, you had to have some kind of resistance to warp energy to touch the experimental device. And there was records and documents about this from the servo skulls in the game, which confirmed Drogon made this device by going into the warp and using his Psyker abilities to pull energy from the warp. The problem is, as of Space Marine 2, that's no longer the case because they brought back the experimental device for the events of the second game, and it was revealed that it was not actually a warp object. It was retconned to be a Necron pylon control device that just manipulates like space-time. Because that's what Necron pylon things do. They reinforce or they weaken the fabric of the space-time fabric of the universe itself, which allows the warp to either weaken or strengthen its connection to real space, allowing portals to either wither or strengthen, or wither or thrive. So, even though there are statements that the energy from that could crack a planet in half, that's technically not true anymore because the device itself isn't actually supposed... It's retroactively a Necron device. Not that the Necrons couldn't blow up a planet with their technology, but it's not meant to do that, and it's not just pure energy. It's specifically meant for Necron tech. It's kind of like a weird thing where, like, originally it was designed to be a Chaos device, that was, or a Chaos demon essentially, tricking Drogon into believing he was building a weapon that could specifically kill the orcs. But then it was not. I just bring this up because people are going to ask, why is it that like Noble Team could grab the experimental device without any consequences? Because it's not a warp energy based device anymore. It doesn't do those things.
Wouldn't
Also,
also potentially protect them from that, since in space
it would.
The shields protect, call Magnus or whatever.
Well, there's also another thing, which is kind of... This one's going to kind of surprise people, but might not surprise other people. Warp energy wouldn't have the same effect on anyone from the Halo universe because souls in Halo are not made of the same properties as the souls in the Warhammer 40k universe. So, in Halo, souls are what is referred to as an essence or a pattern. And according to the Forerunners in Ancient Humanity, they are basically data, or like a quantum informational data composite that exists in that its true destination exists in the domain, which is a reality beyond time and space, far beyond slip space and the universe itself. That's the final destination of like souls in Halo. and it basically makes up like every facet of your being, but its ultimate, truest essence is just data. It's quantum information. So, why I bring this up is that the warp and things from chaos, which is ultimately going to be relevant at the end of House of Secrets, and I believe it's, hang on, what is it, Chapter 11? Point of No Return. When they activate the Psychic Scourge, or attempt to activate the Scourge at the top of the tower, the chaos, like the warp in general, is made out of psychic energy and emotions, raw energy, but also the stuff of soul matter. The warp essentially is ectoplasma, which is what souls in Warhammer are made of, just generic soul energy. That is not what a soul in Halo is made of. So any sort of soul-based damage, any sort of like emotional, mental things, any sensations like that are caused from the warp are not going to have an effect on the souls of people from Halo. I'd also like to point out that that's technically the case for people in Warhammer as well, that just don't have souls or have souls that work differently. A good example would be the pariahs. So the pariahs in Warhammer don't actually have a soul at all, also called blanks. They're basically people who don't have a soul, but in the place of a soul in the warp, they have something that's akin to a void that essentially just eats everything around them, that causes like this feeling of, emptiness. So when they're around chaos demons or even like sorcerers, they cause them enormous amounts of pain. At the bare minimum, like an untrained pariah is essentially invisible to a chaos demon. They can't see them because chaos demons and things from the warp find out where you are, because they see, when they look at you, they don't just see your physical position in the universe, they see your soul in the warp. But if you don't have a soul, they can't see anything. It's like you're not even there. So if you hid inside of a building and you were a pariah and a demon was walking by looking for people and there was no one else in there with a soul, or no one else at all, they would not even know you're in there unless they had a reason to believe you were there. Necrons are basically the same way, where they don't have souls and they're not replaced with anything else. They are stated to be anathema to the warp, and because they don't have a soul, they can't be affected. Their emotions can't be affected. Their fate can't be affected. I just point this out because, like, not having a soul or having something that replaces a soul that has different properties basically accomplishes the same thing in Warhammer. And these are for people who live in Warhammer, under Warhammer's rules and its laws. And they're not affected by chaos under these conditions. So I'm not going to assume someone from a completely different universe whose souls and things are completely functionally different are going to be affected by chaos at all. Because people who even live in the universe don't have to worry about being affected by it. Wait, did I cut out, or was it all clear?
You did not cut out. Most of it was clear. The final like word was cut out, but that was most
Yes.
clear. You were fine.
So, just for words, if anyone's going to point out like passive effects of demons or chaos demons or psychers, none of that's going to mean anything. Like I said before, only direct sources of warp energy being concentrated into like an energy blast and shot at them are going to mean anything. Like mental suggestion, trying to seep thoughts into their mind or anything. At least using the warp in an indirect manner, trying to like whisper to their soul. That stuff's not going to work. None of it will work. They'll have to directly touch them with these things. And for the reasons I mentioned, touching a Spartan is going to be very difficult. Especially since they're in the conditions of the Space Marine, and the Space Marines, even when the Chaos Demons show up at the end of Chapter 3, or Act 3, the Space Marines are capable of reacting to and fighting all of the Chaos Demons anyway. Though it is my position that what's probably going to end up happening is that the experimental device is probably not going to fall into the hands of Nemeroff anyway, because the 6 Spartans are not going to give it to Drogon, since they'll just activate it themselves. But even if they did, even if they saw Drogon basically giving up the weapon, they would just shoot him if they realized he was a traitor. They're not going to wait for like dramatic effect the way that the Space Marines did in the game. Though I personally believe Titus wouldn't have allowed him to get that far. That only happened for like plot armor for Nemeroff. Um, but Nimroth, when he basically comes out of this little portal here, he essentially just kind of force chokes you all to the ground. I'll say that can probably still happen since he's using warp energy and imposing on them. However, if there is any statements in the guide later, I don't have any of them point, but if it's ever confirmed that was happening because he's directly influencing their soul, then that ability would not work. Um, and then I think, aside from that, like, this should be fine. At this point, you're currently fighting the orcs and the orc war boss because he comes out of, like, nowhere looking for the experimental device because he thinks it'll build a new weapon, or he basically wants it because you want it. And during the scenario, Titus was going to get killed by Nemeroth, but the war boss showed up and essentially tried to attack him. Or, well, the war boss, you were actually going to fight the war boss. The war boss got tackled by like 10 chaos demons, sent flying off the side, and then he came back up with none of the chaos demons on his body, implying he killed them all, and then just tackled Nemeroth off the side. So even assuming Nemeroth could hold them down with that power, the war boss is just going to intercept Nemeroth like he did in the game. And then they'll just leave and be like, oh, we have to go fight whoever this random dude is, which I'll be honest, I don't know if Nemeroth's dialogue is the same in this scenario, because he was expecting Space Marines, and he's just going to open the portal and be like, who the hell are you? Where are the Emperor's lapdogs? What is this?
Who are you people?
Well, for context, Nemeroth is a Chaos Space Marine, loyal to the Chaos Gods, that's coming here to get a device to help him turn into a Demon Primarch. He's expecting, loyalists of the Emperor, not 6 random substitute super soldiers that came out of fuck all nowhere, that apparently don't seem to have souls, and are all conveniently located near his experimental device. Bro's gonna be like, wait a minute, this isn't part of the plan. What were you saying?
That would definitely be a problem since these people actually have, thought process beyond just heresy.
Well, I think, for what it's worth, Nemeroth will probably try to recruit them once he realizes how resourceful they are, especially since he can't get access to their souls. And of course, they're just going to turn him down because he's a comically large, evil person with literal fucking demons. And bloodletters, so demons of corn. Honestly, after this, you just kind of fight your way through a couple. Well, you don't really fight your way through demons. You fight your way through demons and orcs, because for Dying of the Light, which is the last, and like Sleeping Giant, like chapters 12 and 13, you're still fighting the orcs that are on the planet, and they're fighting the demons, and they're also killing the demons, because you can also kill demons with conventional weapons in Warhammer. You don't need any special tools. Granted, it will just send the demon's soul back to the warp, but like their body still occupies a physical space in the warp, so you can just kind of poke them with some guns, and they just die. Or you can just let the orcs do it, and then just shoot the orcs afterwards, which is basically what everyone does in the campaign anyway. Eventually, they will have to fight some Chaos Space Marines and Chaos Psychers and Havocs, but actually, Havocs are a form of that. Chaos Psychers and Chaos Space Marines, but I've kind of already explained that, like, most weapons that the UNSC has can already go through the Mjolnir armor, if not damage the Mjolnir armor. I'm fairly certain they can go through the Astartes armor, since the Astartes armor has nowhere near the feats. It doesn't even weigh as much as the Astartes armor. It doesn't even weigh as much as the Mjolnir armor. It is nowhere near the durability feats, nor the statements, and it's consistently punctured or killed by things that are weaker than what the Mjolnir armor has shown. So their guns and weapons, from the DMR to the sniper rifle to the shotgun to the light machine gun, is definitely going to kill them, especially George's light machine gun. Actually, let's talk about George's light machine gun, because I haven't mentioned that at all. And some of you might be wondering, why I bring it up. There's a very, very specific reason. Is a unique weapon that's uniquely customized by him. It's a well, actually, it's just called heavy machine gun, really, or the M247H heavy machine gun. It's 12.7 millimeter HVE rounds that can basically tear through the most resistant of Covenant infantry shields. Essentially, this thing is a high velocity explosive light machine gun. And to be clear, technically, all like assault rifles, saws, and heavy machine guns in the UNSC use 12.7 millimeter. So before anyone wants to ask if that's not really that big, like no, that's actually the size of an LMG round in IRL, and they all use the same round. So even if it wasn't, the fact that the SAW uses light machine gun rounds and they didn't even change the ammunition type for the assault rifle means you're getting hit with the same bullets. Except in this case, they're a higher velocity round version of it, which the assault rifles don't have high velocity, they just have armor-piercing FMJ. And they're also explosive rounds. So that means that when George is shooting you, the rounds are blowing up on contact, and they're going to be going way faster than they normally have. So they have more velocity, more, and they have explosive power on top of kinetic energy hitting your armor. So I think it's safe to say most of the Space Marines' armors is going to get turned into fucking mush, generally. I don't see them surviving that. Psychers as well. Those Psychers do have an energy barrier, so it's going to take them longer to die. Chaos Trader Guardsmen are just basically regular guardsmen, except their eyes are glowing. So they'll die in like a few hits instead of several. Or maybe one, depending on who's doing. What were you saying, Zem?
No, I didn't say anything. Carry on.
Okay. Yeah, so aside from that, they'll just try to go activate after being tricked into attempting to use the Psychic Surge. They'll just grab the experimental device, which is what Titus does, and take it to the Titan. Basically, well, actually, no. No, they might not, because they wouldn't know to... I don't think that they wouldn't know how to operate the Titan, technically. So I think there's a real possibility that unless the Spartans figure out how to access the Titan, they might be stuck on Graia with an army of chaos. Which normally wouldn't be an issue, but like... You know, Nemirov does confirm he doesn't actually have all of his fleet here with him, so they're basically going to get stuck here fighting nothing but the Chaos troops, like forever. And the world might end up getting hit with like an Exterminatus or Cyclonic Torpedoes or something. Well, actually it is a Forge world, so maybe it might not. But it would end up getting hit with orbital bombardment if the Imperium realized it was basically being denied to a Chaos invasion. So, if they can operate it, if they can sort of figure out how to... Well, actually, no. Hold on. No, they don't, because there's actually guardsmen inside of the Titan that are operating it. And you just tell them that you're going to put something inside of their... that you're going to use the experimental device to power their shots. So yeah, the Noble team will either run around looking for like a cannon or the Titan until they eventually get the chance to blow open that spire. It might take them a little bit longer because they're the battlefield. But yeah, I guess they don't have to pilot it. Never mind. You can see my knowledge of Space Marine 1 is really paying off because I'm totally not stumbling and sliding over myself trying to find out the answer for these missions. I'll say Victory and Sacrifice is not going to go the way that it did. So, Victory and Sacrifice is the mission where Sidonius dies, because he's just fighting like some traitor or whatever. And then he sees Nemiroff coming out of portal out of the corner of his eye, and he just kind of turns away from him so that Nemiroff can like stab him from behind. That would never happen to Noble Team, assuming they would even know that they had to go there to take him out in the first place, because they wouldn't even know where their souls are located. I guess they'd know where the experimental device is. That would never happen. Not only because Noble Team would be covering him, but most of them would have motion sensors and things that could detect him, even as he's coming out of the portal. So they would just dodge. Also, depending on who's there, if it's like Six or if it's George, George could just he could just catch Nemiroff's hand and just punch him in the face. Since George is about as big as Nemiroff is, he is bigger than the standard Space Marine by a bit. I think he's over like 7 foot something. Standard Space Marines are about 7 foot, and he is in like Terminator. So if Nemiroff tries to come get them here, if he doesn't portal hop out, Nemiroff might just die. Because in the game, Titus kills him by fighting him while he's falling off a platform and punching him in the face repeatedly with a chain sword. And the only reason you're able to like really damage him in that scenario is because Nemiroff doesn't wear a helmet over his like Terminator thing, so you just hit him in the face because he has no face protection, and you just keep hitting him over and over and over again until he eventually his body just explodes into like chaos energy. So I think I could just argue they could just kill Nemiroff here, probably with like rockets, Spartan lasers, or anything, because he's just wearing a Terminator outfit, which does make him as strong as a tank, but they have weapons that can kill tanks. I would argue their weapons are strong enough to I would argue their weapons are strong enough to pierce materials that are equivalent to a tank. If we want to say that's not fair, sniper rifles are considered an anti-aircraft weapon and anti-material weapon in Halo. Rocket launchers, which Emil would have at this point, is literally used to take out tanks. A Spartan laser is stated to have the ability to take out a Wraith. And they have all these things. So they could also just keep shooting him in the face until he dies or explodes into chaos energy. What were you going to say, Zem? I feel like you wanted to contribute something.
Don't say it like that. Don't say, oh well, they can beat him right now. Yeah, it's not a big deal. I mean, he's only got like tank armor. Oh, it's not really.
Unfortunately, the Terminator armor, like everybody who wears the Terminator armor doesn't wear facial protection for it, and even if they did, in this case, Nemiroff doesn't, and he does show up here. Which the only reason he was here was to get the experimental device, but like, let's be honest, he was here to kill Sidonius. That's the whole significance of this event. It's like one of those fucking cheeky Halo deaths where the character doesn't have to die at all, and it makes no sense for them to die at all, but they just do die for dramatic effect, and everybody's like, it's so sad. I'm like, no, it fucking wasn't. It was stupid. Like, just kill him. So yeah, like there's no reason they shouldn't just be able to open fire on him. I mean, if you want to say he like portal hops away until he hop to grab it, like okay, but he would still be without the experimental device, so he'd have to fight them for the experimental device. And I think I've kind of already like established how effective Spartans are at fighting at this point. But if I do have to bring in other examples, I mean, they mostly elites most of the time who are trained from a warrior race to fight since they're like little boys. They basically have statements which I provide for the stream that they're taught to fight the moment they can hold a weapon. Spartans in the early novels have examples of Spartan 2s, but George is a Spartan 2, and most of them would be as old, if not older, than the Spartan 2s were when they did this. Most of them had feats of fighting members of the Silent Shadow, which are an elite premier hunter-killer units sent by the prophets to take out whomever they wish. They're considered like a weapon into themselves. So even without blades, they're basically like a killing weapon that constantly needs to be monitored. Blade Masters have also been fought by these people, as well as Ultras, which are basically people that elites that have committed their life to being a masterman, which is a very impressive thing to do when you live as part of a culture of people that assigns names and ranks entirely based on merit and honor that you've achieved in victories in battle, when you're all taught to be warlike. This is also a race that is very anti-nepotism, or nepotism. So what that means in the context of elite culture is that, like, when elites grow up, they do not know who their fathers are, because their fathers do this intentionally. They basically, they don't abandon, but they never see their kids after they leave for war, whatever field that they're doing, so that their children do not feel entitled to any sort of like position of power or hierarchy. It's meant to increase the competitiveness of young men in Sangheili, so that they feel the need to try their best possible effort, especially when it comes to combat and war. So every single Sangheili out there is constantly doing everything they can to prove they're the best possible thing since like sliced bread. And the best of them become Blade Masters. The best of those become the Silent Shadow. And the Silent Shadow has been consistently killed by Spartan 2s, and in some cases Spartan 3s. Noble Team would be an exceptional crew of Spartan 3s, with a Spartan 2 being George. So, at the bare minimum, they scale to an elite warrior race that would specialize in multiple martial arts and sword fighting and whatnot. So, not to mention being masters of all weapons, because there are statements that Spartans are masters of all weapons. So I think in terms of skill, they're pretty much equivalent to, if not greater than, the greatest possible wank that you could produce for Space Marines. Except I can more or less back it up, whereas you can't really do that for Space Marines, because Space Marines are kind of like inconsistent. Some of them have centuries of experience, some of them have decades, some of them have decades but haven't actually had decades of direct combat. They've just been alive for decades. And in Nemiroth's case, I believe direct statements provided just kind of put him in the, it's called, give me a moment. One more moment. His age is unknown. Just that at one point, he basically turned his back on the Imperium, so he's probably decades old, but we don't know the exact amount. Also, he only weighs 1,200 pounds, which is technically only about the weight of like a Spartan, but not that much lighter. And Titus can actually punch him in the face, so it is possible to move them even while being at a lighter weight value. That's 750 pounds. So this is also not be applicable for George, because George is just like a giant. I think they're going to kill Nemiroth here, which is just going to stop the Chaos Invasion. I don't have any reason to believe Nemiroth has the tools to beat them, because Nemiroth, even though he shows up in a Terminator armor, he doesn't actually bring anything with him. He doesn't bring any guns, any assault cannons, lasers, power weapons, plasma weapons. He doesn't bring any of that to the scenario. He doesn't actually use the Terminator armor, and he basically exposes his face and is like, come and get me, and we're like, okay, but we're gonna die. Like, he just kind of challenges you to a hand-to-hand combat scenario after you tackle him off of a roof. So since that's never going to happen, he's just going to die here, which pretty much means the psychic sort of scenario is going to be, like, the psychic evasion is going to basically be lost once you destroy the experimental device. Well, actually, no. No, because the Spire will have been taken out by the Titans. Yeah, so the invasion's basically over, because they'll have used the experimental device by the Titans to blow up the Spire, which will destroy the warp gate. The only reason it gets opened is because Nemiroff comes over the platform, kills Sidonius, and takes the experimental device off of him, and then teleports back and uses it to reopen the portal to bring the rest of his fleet. And then you kill Nemiroff and then destroy the device. But like in this case, it wouldn't even matter that you have the device with you because Nemiroff didn't take it over there since he died. So yeah, we're just gonna skip the entire last portion of the act, and most of the Chaos Demons are either gonna get hunted on the planet, or they're just gonna die as their connection to the warp is gonna dissipate. Since the Spire just got annihilated, so the warp gate to real space is now closing, which means all the demons are just gonna scream and gate away, since they need a gate back to the Immaterium. Yeah, so aside from like additional Chaos Space Marine forces that are on the ground, they're pretty much fine here. They secured the Titans. Well, I guess there is the Orc War Boss, which they'd still have to go downstairs and fight or find him, but I guess they don't know where he is. They destroyed the Chaos Scourge. They recovered the experimental device. They obliterated the Chaos Gate. And in this scenario, most of the Space Marine forces in the area basically got redeployed, like the Death Watch and the Blood Ravens. So the forces on the ground, as well as the Imperium, would have like more and more and more troops that they could use at their disposal. So they're pretty much gonna win. So I guess they just either hang out and chill around, or they go out and fight more until the rest of them are mopped up on the planet. And thus the scenario is over. Um, I think the only concern that I may have glossed over was probably just ammo, but strictly speaking, I kind of already mentioned this before. The Spartans are physically stronger and faster than most of the orcs, and they could technically just melee bash them anyway, so that they don't really have to like use their guns necessarily. And there are a couple ammo drops throughout the level. Plus, most of their guns are going to be like 2 or 3 shotting orcs that are like really big. And most of the small orcs, they'll just be killing with their fists anyway. A lot of them they can skip past or stealth past. And in the later half of the campaign, Chaos and orcs are basically fighting and killing each other, so they just have to wait until the scenario turns in their favor and just kill the survivors. So they're essentially like cheating their way through the scenario. The Space Marines did through half the scenario, because both of the factions are fighting each other and they don't have to actually do anything. All right. I think that's everything.
All right. Sounds good. This time I have no way to defend the opposing party, so we'll actually call it here.
Bro, why are we acting like you'd be a simp for Chaos anyway?
That's true. You're right. You're right. But so okay. So with that said, thank you guys for your time as always. Have a nice day. I'll see you guys on the next stream or video. Take care, everybody.